So next up, we're going to jump into incident response and forensics. So this is and you'll actually hear it used interchangeably if you decide to kind of go along either of these career paths. You'll notice that a lot of people are doing the same thing. So incident response and forensics, and yes, that is my cat, by the way. I'm a cat lover. I love dogs, and all animals do. But anyways, digressing again.
Oh, that's actually your cat.
That is actually my world famous cat. Her name is Snowflake.
That is fantastic.
Yes,
I didn't know that.
Yes, so she finally got to star in a video, so she's officially a movie star. So good deal. So incident response and forensics. Now, we'll dive into this, once we do like that session where we kind of deep dive into it. But I did want to mention that, as I kind of mentioned right before, that these are used a lot interchangeably. So, like, for example, an incident responder will normally do some kind of forensic work. Now, they may not do like a full deep dive investigation, but they will generally do some kind of capacity forensics to analyze what occurred, what kind of information is happening, and then if they find that it's something that needs to be referred to like law enforcement, they'll kind of escalate it from there. You'll generally see somebody working like as a forensic investigator if they're working like in some kind of law enforcement capacity. So we group them together just because a lot of people do pretty much all of it. But if you want to deep dive into any of these, if you want to kind of a career path off, forensics is more so, forensic investigators more so if you're going to actually work in law enforcement or with law enforcement, and then like incident response is your more generalized private sector, individual. So we'll kind of talk about like the typical day and that sort of stuff. So what do any of these people do, right? Well, obviously, as incident response, the name implies, they identify and respond to incidents, right? So what's an incident? Who even cares? Well, basically that's anything that may be abnormal, right? So it's generally going to be some kind of a breach, but it could be something else, right? It could be like, let's say Joe decides that he wants to work at Disneyland and not Cybrary, and so he takes this PowerPoint slide to Disneyland. Well, that's technically an incident, right? Because Joe's taken that PowerPoint presentation with my cat on it to Disneyland, and I might be cool with him using the picture of my cat, but we're not cool with him using like this to present to Mickey Mouse.
Proprietary
right?
work data.
Exactly, right? So that would be an incident. So it's not necessarily, well, that would probably be, that could be a borderline criminal act, but that's not necessarily something as dramatic as, like somebody hacking your systems, but it's still an incident. So incident could be a lot of different things. So basically what a incident responder or even a forensic investigator does is they're going to follow some kind of a standard process, right? So it could be a process, set forth by like a law enforcement agency. So like as a forensic investigator, hey, we have to collect, data in this certain way. It could also just be a process, implied by the organization, like, hey, this is how we do it. It could also be something, bound by like laws or regulations, like if you want this admissible in a court of law, whether it's civil or criminal, then you have to do these things a certain way. So a lot of different processes that we could follow, and it's really dependent upon your organization as well as kind of what you're doing and different laws and regulations that might be applicable in your jurisdiction. Now that being said, and I'll mention this again when we kind of deep dive into the subject next week, I believe we do it. But keep in mind that you may be doing forensic work, but you may not be able to get all the data, right? So if there's a server like over in Russia that doesn't care that you have an investigation here in the U.S., then you may not be able to get that information, but you'll try to get as much information as you possibly can. A lot of this is going to, it allows you to determine kind of the severity of the incident, right? So is it something minor, like Joe took my cat photo and put it on his own PowerPoint slide, or is it something major, like somebody, yeah, he's probably doing that right now as I speak. But is it something major, right? Where someone hacked us, took our data, something like the recent Marriott breach or many other breaches that have been out there. Is it something like that, where it's something major where we need to bring in like other entities, whether that's law enforcement or private organizations to help us investigate this stuff? So as an incident responder, you're kind of that first line, so to speak. After like a network admin or somebody sees the issue, they tell you, and then you're kind of that first line of defense and determining, is there an incident and what do we need to do next? And then we just use different tools to get all this data, right? So different forensics tools, and that's going to vary somewhat on how much time we spend on it based off if it's like a civil case, administrative type of investigation, or if it's a criminal investigation, with the latter being obviously the most time spent in a criminal investigation. So different Of course, reporting communication, as we've kind of driven home. So by the end of this presentation, you should have at least reporting and communication memorized as the main things to take away. And then you have to have a good foundational knowledge in like different networking concepts and protocols. So again, a good kind of next step from network engineer would be to go into like incident response. You need that good foundational knowledge of computer networking as well as like operating systems. So you kind of need that first level knowledge. It's kind of challenging to go directly into incident response. However, we do have a career path for it, and we'll talk about that a little later. You also want to have knowledge of different like cyber threats and vulnerabilities. So as you may or may not know, just looking at the news, you can see that there's different data breaches and stuff like that going on all the time. That just means, what you should take away from that is that there's a lot of different cyber threats going on all the time. Some of them are the same, we just never really fix them, but a lot of them are changing all the time. And so as an incident responder or forensic investigator, you have to be abreast of the current trends in the industry. As I mentioned already, laws and regulations that you may need to follow based on your jurisdiction and also based on your organization. And then the number one thing with forensics and incident response is always preserving the evidence, right? So we don't want to like get some information from our server log and then delete it. That's kind of pointless, right? Like just because we had seen it doesn't mean that it may not be used in a later investigation.